So I wanted to talk about something quickly. When you think about certain like positions and certain players, and like there's been some discussions around like our positioning on the pitch, in terms of like our system and the players that can play in certain positions. I feel like at times you get situations whereby people start to feel like, oh, like you can't have this type of player. Just take left back for example. It's like Kieran Tierney has been kind of like a large part of a fan base are like he can't play in this team or he can't play here, but it doesn't work like that. Like the system is completely different, and I said in a completely different video where I spoke about how it's about the system, not the individuals. Like where's how Zinchenko plays on the pitch, that's just he's just playing in a certain position, but that doesn't mean that Kieran Tierney can't play in this team. It doesn't have to be him. It could be a different left back who plays like Tierney. If Arteta, for let's just say for example, they've had a falling out, but I think it's important to understand the systems and the position in the system, just so we can know, like, when you're looking at transfers or you're looking at other players or even players on the bench, you don't just shun these players to the side thinking they don't fit this system. The first 11 and the positions they play on the pitch is not necessarily the position that the players on the bench would play. Put it this way, I feel like there's a lot of discussion around, like, the left side of the pitch, like Zinchenko, Martinelli, Xhaka, and how they're playing. But when you actually break it down and you think about it, the right side of the pitch is the one that's pretty much more limited in terms of like positional rotation than the left hand side. So there's probably it's in the on the right hand side there's probably more fixed positions than it is on the left side, which is probably more flexible than people would think. But you'd see more discourse on the left where people would be more like Tierney can't play here, or this guy can't play in this position, or it has to be this guy that plays it, just stuff like that. And I just wanted to just quickly talk about our system and everything like that. So just to break down our system to begin with, obviously we play with the 4-3-3, but in position it's actually 3-2-5. The reason being is this. So let's start from the goalkeeper. Of course, in every system the goalkeeper's position doesn't change, so he's just there. Ramsdale's there. So we think about how we're positioned when, and I'm talking about when we actually have the ball. We have three defenders who are usually positioned, one on the left hand side, one in the middle, and one on the right hand side who's has a bit more flexibility to overlap or to receive a bit more higher than the left centre back in this system. And then right in front of those three defenders, you have two positions there, which is the midfield positions, where you have where usually Zinchenko plays and Partey plays. Meanwhile, in the back three, you've got Gabriel playing on the left-hand side. You've got Saliba, who mainly plays in the middle. And then you've got Ben White, who plays on the right-hand side. So, looking at that shape, for example, and then looking at the midfield where we have in front of those three, we've got Zinchenko and Partey. Then you go into the final third, which is, as I mentioned, 3-2-5. You've got the five up there. Usually on the left, you have Martinelli, who stays really wide. In the left half space, which is the channel on the left side, you've got Xhaka, who plays mainly on that side. Then you've got the striker, which is either Gabriel Jesus or Nketiah or Trossard, who play up top. You've got Odegaard, who plays on the right half space, so basically the right channel. Then you've got Saka, who plays on the far right. So when you think about it like that, and you think about our system and how it's all shaped out, is the 3-2-5, and as I mentioned already, in possession. So why do we play like this to begin with? So the main reason why we play like this is because in the build-up, the main goal is to have a great build-up so you can arrive in the final third with the opposition being disorganized. So you want to draw the opposition in with a good build-up play. Yeah. So that, because otherwise, if you don't draw them in with a good build-up play, if your build-up is slow and you arrive in the final third, you're going to meet them having 10 players behind the ball, or having everyone behind the ball. So it's going to be a lot difficult to break them down because teams are just going to decide to park the bus and just wait there. But what's possible with a good build-up is that if you bypass the press, what can happen is that you could possibly arrive with a 5-3 situation, a 5-5 situation. You arrive with them having less players, or you arrive with them coming back into their shape, but they're running back into their shape, so they're disorganized. They're not as organized. They're not as prepared. So therefore, there's going to be gaps and there's going to be space for you to attack. That's the whole point of a good build-up. And how we try to do this is that we try to outnumber the opposition who's pressing us. So take, for example, most teams play with maybe two strikers or one striker. We've got three centre-backs there. You see, Gabriel, Saliba, Ben White, we've got three. So even if they try to press us with the one striker, we outnumber them with three. If some teams play with a 4-4-2, they got two strikers. We've got three defenders that we can outnumber them. Then you've got some teams who play with what, three forwards who want to press centrally. In that case, we can still outnumber them simply because we also got a goalkeeper. That's why you see coaches that play with this kind of system, they rely on the goalkeeper being comfortable on the ball, under pressure. It's not about playing like them being elite in terms of passing. It's just them being having the confidence on the ball so that they don't panic doing build-up play and just kick it long. The aim is this: if you have a team who comes with three attackers and they want to press you, you got the goalkeeper in Ramsdale who would act as the third guy. So you got three centre backs and you got a goalkeeper. And they got three players. How do you outnumber them? You outnumber them by having four players. So that's how three defenders plus the goalkeeper. What would happen is the goalkeeper would act as an extra guy there, and one of those three defenders would act as a free man. So let's say, for example, they press you with a free and they're on our defenders. One of these defenders has to go behind their press. That's what the key thing. You always hear about the free man, finding the free man. The only way to find a free man is to get someone who's a free man is basically someone who's available and free on the pitch. And how do you do that when you've got three guys pressing you and you've got three defenders? Is to have an extra guy behind them who's waiting to receive. So you got the goalkeeper, you got maybe Saliba, you got maybe Ben White, and then you got Gabriel who's positioned maybe behind the free attackers that are pressing. Therefore, that's the free man. So you try to work the ball around their press to get the ball to Gabriel, who's the free man, and then therefore, just like that, you've bypassed three attackers and you can start counter-attacking, or you can start attacking them, and you're basically going to face less men. So that's, if they were going to defend with 10 men behind the ball, that's already three taken out already, and you've got 7 behind the ball, depending on how quickly you attack their box. So that's the whole point of that free man kind of thing. And even if, depending on how they want to press as well, you still got 2 in midfield, which is Zinchenko and Partey, who again receive behind their midfield to give you the extra man. So obviously you've got teams that play with 3 midfielders or 2 midfielders or whatever the case is. When that happens, you've still got your 2 midfielders. You still got Odegaard. You still got Xhaka. So that gives you 4 players. So you also hear terms like the box midfield and things like that. Most teams have 3 guys in midfield. When you play with this kind of system, you got Zinchenko, you got Partey, you got Odegaard and Xhaka, who are higher up the pitch, making themselves as 3 men, with the centre-backs allowing us to also build the ball at the back as well. So what these guys will then do is, the Xhaka and Odegaard, they're waiting in the final third because they're behind the press. As I said, you always want to be behind the opposition's press. So if they're pressing our midfield with 3 players, you've got 2 in Zinchenko and Partey, then you've got Xhaka there and you got Odegaard there. Xhaka in the left half space, Odegaard in the right half space. Those are the 3 men right there. Sometimes Odegaard drops deep if we're being outnumbered, and then Xhaka is the 3 man. Sometimes Xhaka drops deep, and then Odegaard is the 3 man. It's just all about having players behind the opposition's press so you can bypass them. Again, if they press us with 3 and we bypass their press and we get the ball to Odegaard or Xhaka, all of a sudden you're facing their back 4 and you've got you got 5 players, so you have 5v4. As I said, the key is always to be able to outnumber the opposition, find the 3 man, bypass their press, and with that you can arrive in the final third or in their box with an advantage in terms of like a numerical advantage, and which allows you to be able to find more space to create chances to score goals. That's the whole aim of having a good build-up play, and why we're playing this 3-2-5 system. So let me even go back to like some of the key areas in the system and where the confusion starts to come in. So you take Zinchenko, for example, and you get people saying like the left back has to be able to go inside, has to be able to play in that 2. Because remember, as I mentioned, you got the 3, then you got the 2. And they're like, the left back has to be able to play inside, has to be able to play midfield. That's not the case. The left back doesn't have to play in there. That position where the 2 is there, that position exists without Zinchenko. So even if it's not Zinchenko that's playing there, if we had a guy in left centre mid, take for example Xhaka's role, if we had a guy in Xhaka's role, like let's look at maybe take someone like Kroos, for example, or Luka Modric, guys who are great in a build-up play, great at receiving, players who can play the role that Zinchenko's playing for us. The role that Zinchenko's playing for us is the role that you get from some of these midfielders who receive in deep areas and bypass the opposition's press with passing and dribbling. Guys like Kovacic, Modric, Kroos, guys like that. If we had a left centre mid who had this kind of ability on the ball, who was able to progress the ball from deep areas into the final third with passing and dribbling, then Zinchenko doesn't have to be the guy who goes in. So even if Zinchenko doesn't play in midfield, the advantage we get with Zinchenko gets passed on to the midfielder who plays that role. So I think sometimes people think if Zinchenko's not here, we lose something. We don't lose anything. It's just about if you have the profile that can replace what he's doing. So let's say, for example, we had a guy who can play that role. yeah, who can drop deep and play, progress the ball with passing and dribbling in the left centre mid, and we didn't have Zinchenko. Instead, we had Kieran Tierney, who was a left back who wants to overlap instead. What's the role of the left wing? So again, the role of the left wing is to stretch the pitch on that side, and then when we eventually arrive in the final third, the player goes on the inside. So if Zinchenko is not on the pitch to be the one who goes inside, it doesn't mean that space is going to be unoccupied. That space will still be occupied by someone. So we had a centre mid who was able to offer what Zinchenko does in the build-up play. That player will then drop deep and occupy that 2 next to Partey. Yeah, so there's the 3, and that player will occupy the 2 on the left side next to Partey. Then let's say we had Kieran Tierney instead of Zinchenko at left back. Rather than what Zinchenko does and going inside, now that there's a midfielder who's occupying that space, Kieran Tierney would instead just go high up the pitch and offer width on the left-hand side in order to stretch the pitch. The reason why we stretch the pitch and why we have Saka and the other winger Martinelli stretching the pitch is to create space in the middle, to stretch it wide, pull the players out wide and create space in the middle. What Tierney would do is, since he's not inside, he would then stretch the pitch on the left-hand side instead. Now, that leaves Martinelli to play a different role. Martinelli instead will now drift on the inside and play that role that Xhaka plays, which is attacking the half space, which is a role that also suits Martinelli as well, because he's not a player that wants to be stuck out wide. He's a player who wants to be on the inside and attack space. So again, just by you've basically rotated it. You've pushed the midfielder who was playing in the half space into the deep area where Zinchenko plays, and you've pushed the left back into the left wing, and you've pushed the left wing into the half space. You see, you've basically just rotated it. So this discourse about Tierney can't do this or Tierney can't play here, we just need to accept is either Tierney is not rated by the coach or not. That's just the way it is. But Tierney can 100% play in the system, because the system is not determined by a left back going into midfield. That's not a system. The left back is just going into midfield because that's the position that's available, because Xhaka is not taking up that space. Xhaka is instead taking up the space high up the pitch, and Martinelli is taking up the space wide and left. So the space that Zinchenko has to take up is that left centre mid. Previous to all of this, even when you think about there was even certain games like earlier in the season where Zinchenko was receiving, where Xhaka was receiving, and Xhaka was staying a lot deeper, and then Martinelli was staying wide. So you can always rotate on that side. I think there's less rotation on the right-hand side. The reason being is because when you've got like Ben White, for example, he has to act as the third centre-back, because you still want to be able to have enough options defensively to be able to deal with transitions. So although Ben White overlaps and gets into the final third, he still has to also act, he still has to be disciplined as well, because when we lose the ball, he has to get back. But again, that position doesn't have to be a centre-back playing that position. We've had guys like Bakary Sagna in the past who was a right-back who would have been perfect in this system as well, because he can play as a first centre back, but he also attacks the box as well. So again, it's not a case where Ben White has to play because the system's where it is. No, that player doesn't have to play that system. You can have other players playing. You can have another kind of profile on right back playing that system. Someone who's more advanced at right back, but understands that he needs to be disciplined and needs to get back. Then you have Odegaard and Saka. Their role is a lot more strict and a lot more limited in what they can do than others, because Saka has to stay really wide and Odegaard has to stay there, because what you don't want is for Odegaard to drop deep, yeah, and then you have too many players behind the ball. So you need players in the final third. That's why in the right half space, Odegaard's position is he probably has to keep that position. But at times, that can also change as well, because if you have the right backs overlapping, again, if our 2 fullbacks overlap, what would happen is Odegaard and Xhaka would just have to be drifting inside, drifting deep, as I mentioned. So the same thing on the left-hand side will happen on the right-hand side. Would have to drift deep. And because the fullbacks are high up, the wingers would then also have to come inside. That's how Liverpool play, where they have free midfield, and then you got the wingers high and wide. So again, it's not about signing left-backs can play this or signing fullbacks that can play this specific position. No, sign the very best players that are available. Of course, you want them to be able to play in your system, but you sign the best players that are available, and then you have them playing these roles, because again, these roles are interchangeable. They can change. The dynamic of the system can change. It's not fixed. The other thing I wanted to mention again is our high line. And again, when you're looking into some of these players, some of the key things you have to remember again is this. As of course I just mentioned there that sign the very best players. At the same time, you have to keep certain things in mind. Why do we play the high line? We play the high line because we want to be compact. Yeah, we want to have little to no space between our defense and midfield and our attack. And how do you have that? the way to have that is to have less space in between, less space between the defense and attack. And how do you have that again when you're attacking? The only way you can have that when you're attacking is if the defense moves up as your attackers move up. So as we start to attack and we go forward, our defenders also start to push up and come forward as well. So then they start to move up together. The main reason for this is you get the high line. The high line is there so that to ensure that they move up. It's not just a high line for the sake of it. It's a high line to make sure the defenders are moving up close to the midfielders, and the midfielders, as the midfielders are moving up closer to the attackers, which then allows you to be very compact in the space. They're close to each other. Again, what do you get from this? The advantage you get out of this is that when you lose the ball, you're able to counter press immediately. Why would you be able to counter press? Because you already have players in position to immediately counter press and win the ball back and press the opposition. If the gap between the attack and the midfield was massive, then once the opposition loses the ball, what they will do is just they can have enough space to pass the ball around and build up play and counter attack. But if the gap between your attack and midfield and defense is little, they don't have enough space to work. So they have to be doing a lot of the things they're doing under pressure. And as they're having to do all of these things, you have the players already. You already have 5 attackers there willing to quickly press. Have 5 midfielders there willing to cover just behind the attackers. And in case you do eventually, if that press fails, you can always drop back immediately. And how do you drop back? You already have 3 defenders already positioned in shape already to hold off any transition, any counter attack. You got the left back who's right there who can quickly slot in there, and then you got the midfield to start dropping in. So all the players start to drop in as we move backwards, and they're all in position already to drop back. So that's the whole point of the highline, is to ensure that we can quickly counter press, gain the ball back, and continue to keep possession, because that's our aim. Our aim is to control the game by keeping possession. Keeping possession by counter pressing, get the ball back, have the ball, and then you can attack and keep on creating chances again. That's the whole aim of this whole thing. And then of course in attack you want to have the 5, because you want to be able to attack all the zones. You want to be able to stretch the pitch on the left, stretch the pitch on the right, create space in the middle, attack the space in behind, draw players out of position and attack the space. And of course when you're building a play, bypass their press and then attack them in behind. That's the whole point of how we play in the system. So again, these are certain things you have to remember. And again, when I mentioned, and just to go back to the last thing I mentioned again, when I did say that sign the very best players, yes, you want to sign the very best players, but you want to sign the players who you know that when they fit into these different kind of systems, they would be able to do the responsibilities in these roles. Because at the end of the day, you don't want to have a striker who's, for example, like Aubameyang, who wouldn't press. So when you're going for the striker, yes, you sign a striker, you can sign whatever profile of striker you want, but you want a striker to be able to also be able to be aggressive in the press, to be able to link up with the other teams, with other players around them. And then also with the left wing and right wing, as I said already, you want the left wing position is not fixed because he can also be on the inside. But when he's out wide, you want him to be able to play 1v1. You want him to be able to stretch the pitch. You want him to have the pace to attack the box in behind. When he's inside, you want him to be able to attack the space in behind as well. So these things are attributes that you look at a winger and you think to yourself, is this winger flexible enough to play the 2 systems that he could possibly play? Because if the left back drifts inside, the winger would have to stay out wide. But if the left back stays and offers the width, that winger would have to come inside. So when you're looking at the signing, you have to ask yourself, can this player play both roles? Is he able to play wide and come inside? Martinelli can do that. Is Saka able to stay really wide and also play in the half space as well? Yes, we've seen him do that. We've seen him be able to do that as well. So these are more of the things that you need to look at rather than just thinking, oh, Tierney can't play here because Zinchenko plays in midfield. That's not how it works. Tierney can play as a left back because there's other roles for the left back, not just that role that Zinchenko plays. It's more of a case of thinking, what's the player capable of doing? Is Kieran Tierney able to overlap and offer a threat in the final third? Is he able to come back and defend when the counter press fails and we need to drop back? Yes. Is Zinchenko, who plays in a certain way, is he able to go into midfield and build up play out the back and find guys in the final third? Yes. Is he able to then drop back into left back space quickly to be able to help us and support with defensively? Yes. Of course, he's not the best defensively, but he understands his role and his positioning. So these are the things that you have to keep in mind when you're thinking about these positions, rather than just ruling out players and saying that they can't play in these roles for different reasons. But anyways, that was my take on our system and our system and individuals. Again, it's always system over the individuals.